Hello, fearless minds. Isn't it strange how some people celebrate before the story is over? They see one setback, one closed door, one painful chapter, and they raise a toast to your downfall. They mistake silence for surrender and scars for weakness. What they don't realize is that every great transformation begins where everyone else stops believing. While they're laughing at what you lost, you're becoming someone they could never defeat. Their celebration is temporary, but your comeback is permanent. Stay until the end, because today you'll discover why your greatest loss may become the moment that destroys every doubt they ever had. Most people don't celebrate because they know the story is over. They celebrate because they believe they have already figured you out. The moment they witness a setback, they convince themselves they have seen the final chapter of your life. They confuse a pause with an ending, a wound with weakness, and a delay with defeat. It makes them comfortable because your struggle validates their own decision to never take risks. As long as you remain beneath them, they don't have to question the limits they placed on themselves. What makes this even more dangerous is how quickly people create conclusions without possessing the full picture. They see one opportunity disappear and assume there are no other. They watch one relationship end and believe you'll never love or be loved again. They notice your silence and imagine you've accepted defeat. They observe your absence and think you've disappeared forever. They celebrate an illusion built from assumptions rather than facts. People have always feared what they cannot predict. Certainty gives them peace, even when that certainty is completely false. The moment your life becomes difficult, they stop expecting greatness from you because it makes their world easier to understand. If someone with your potential can fall, then they feel justified staying exactly where they are. Your struggle becomes their excuse. There is another reason they celebrate too early. They mistake visibility for progress. If they cannot see your growth, they assume it isn't happening. They believe success only exists when it is announced, displayed, and applauded. They forget that the strongest foundations are built underground, hidden from every spectator. A tree spends years strengthening its roots before anyone notices its height. Real transformation follows the same pattern. It happens in silence, away from applause, beyond the reach of those searching for proof. While they are busy discussing your failures, your mind is changing. Your discipline is becoming sharper. Your pain is teaching lessons comfort never could. Every disappointment forces you to remove another illusion. Every betrayal reveals another truth. Every obstacle develops another skill. None of this is visible to people who only judge results. They celebrate because they measure life by appearances, while true growth happens beneath appearances. Notice how quickly critics disappear when the situation changes. The same voices that laughed become strangely quiet. The same people who predicted your failure suddenly act as though they always believed in you. Their confidence was never based on reality. It was based on the temporary image standing in front of them. When the image changes, so does their opinion. This proves they were never evaluating your potential. They were only reacting to your circumstances. Strength is rarely born during comfortable seasons. Comfort makes people predictable. Struggle forces adaptation. It teaches patience, emotional control, resilience, and awareness. Every difficult season demands a new version of yourself. By surviving what others believed would destroy you, you quietly become someone completely different. The person they celebrated losing no longer exists because hardship reshaped your thinking, your habits, and your standards. Ironically, those celebrating often reveal more about themselves than about you. Their excitement over another person's setback exposes insecurity hidden beneath confidence. Secure people don't throw parties for someone else's pain. They focus on building their own future. Only those distracted by comparison find satisfaction and another person's temporary loss. Their celebration becomes evidence of their own limitations. The greatest mistake they make is believing time only works against you. They fail to realize time also works for you. Every day they spend assuming you've given up is another day you're learning, improving, recovering, and preparing. While they remain frozen in yesterday's opinion, you continue evolving beyond the version they thought they understood. Eventually, the distance between who you were and who you've become becomes impossible to ignore. By the time they realize their celebration was premature, your mindset has already shifted beyond seeking their approval. Their applause no longer matters because your identity is no longer connected to their expectations. The loss they mocked became the pressure that forged your discipline, your confidence, and your vision, transforming what looked like defeat into the beginning of a future they never imagined possible. There comes a moment when life removes everything you believed you needed. The plans collapse, familiar faces disappear, opportunities vanish, and the future suddenly feels uncertain. At first, it feels like punishment. You question every decision, replay every mistake, and wonder if this loss defines who you are. But what seems like destruction is often the beginning of the most powerful transformation a person can experience. Losing everything forces you to meet the version of yourself that comfort kept hidden. Comfort has a way of convincing people they are stronger than they really are. As long as life is predictable, there is little reason to test your limits. You follow routines, depend on familiar circumstances, and believe your confidence comes from within. Then, one unexpected event changes everything. Suddenly, the routines disappear. Certainty is replaced with chaos, and every external source of security is taken away. In that moment, you discover whether your strength was real or simply borrowed from your surroundings. Loss has a strange ability to reveal truth. It exposes the people who were only present during your victories. It uncovers friendships built on convenience instead of loyalty. It reveals habits that were slowly weakening your discipline. It forces you to recognize the excuses you've been protecting for years. Painful as it may be, this clarity is priceless because you can only rebuild your life honestly after the illusions have been stripped away. Many people fear losing because they believe it means starting from nothing, but starting from nothing is often an advantage. When nothing is left to protect, fear begins to lose its control over you. You stop worrying about maintaining an image because the image has already been broken. You stop chasing approval because the crowd has already walked away. Without those invisible chains, you gain a level of freedom that many successful people never experience. You begin making decisions based on purpose instead of appearances. History repeatedly proves that extraordinary individuals often emerge from seasons of complete uncertainty. They were not shaped by easy victories, but by relentless challenges that demanded resilience, patience, and courage. Every setback became another lesson. Every rejection became another opportunity to improve. Every disappointment forced them to think differently. The strength they eventually displayed was not something they were born with. It was something they earned through surviving moments that seemed impossible. There is also a psychological shift that happens after profound loss. The things that once terrified you no longer carry the same weight. Failure becomes less frightening because you've already experienced it. Criticism loses its power because you've already been judged. Rejection feels temporary because you've learned that life continues beyond closed doors. This new perspective creates fearlessness, and fearlessness is one of the greatest advantages a person can possess. People watching from the outside rarely understand this transformation. They assume you're weaker because they measure success by possessions, titles, relationships, or public recognition. They don't realize you've gained something far more valuable. You've learned emotional control. You've developed patience. You've discovered how to endure uncertainty without surrendering your purpose. Those qualities cannot be purchased, borrowed, or inherited. They can only be earned through experience. Another hidden gift of losing everything is simplicity. Before hardship, your attention may have been divided among countless distractions. You chased validation, compared yourself to others, and invested energy in proving your worth. After loss, your priorities become crystal clear. You focus only on what truly matters. Every action has intention. Every decision serves a purpose. That clarity becomes a powerful force because concentrated effort always outperforms scattered ambition. The people celebrating your downfall cannot see this internal reconstruction. They assume your silence means defeat, when in reality, your silence is creating a stronger foundation. They believe you've disappeared because there are no public victories to observe. Meanwhile, every difficult day is strengthening your character, sharpening your discipline, and expanding your perspective. You're becoming someone who no longer depends on luck, applause, or perfect circumstances to move forward. The greatest irony is that the very loss others mocked becomes the event that separates you from the person you used to be. Without that painful chapter, you might have remained comfortable, distracted, and limited by the same beliefs that once held you back. What looked like the end was actually the beginning of a life built on resilience instead of comfort, purpose instead of approval, and inner strength instead of temporary success. The loudest victories are rarely the most dangerous. The victories that truly change lives are the ones no one sees coming. While the world is obsessed with constant updates, endless explanations, and public displays of success, there is an extraordinary power in choosing silence. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness because people have been conditioned to believe that confidence must always be announced. They expect strong people to argue, defend themselves, or prove their worth. When you refuse to play that game, they become confused. They mistake your calmness for surrender, never realizing that silence can be the most powerful psychological weapon a person possesses. Every time someone attacks your character, spreads rumors, or celebrates your struggles, they expect a reaction. They feed on emotional responses because every explanation gives them more attention. Every argument keeps you trapped inside their narrative. The moment you stop responding, you take away the fuel that keeps their assumptions alive. Your silence forces them into uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable for people who thought they had complete control over the story. Most individuals cannot tolerate unanswered question. When they no longer receive access to your thoughts, your plans, or your emotions, they begin creating their own versions of reality. They start guessing why you've disappeared. Some believe you've failed completely. Others imagine you've become afraid. A few convince themselves you've accepted defeat. Ironically, every theory they invent reveals more about their own thinking than about your actual life. They fill the silence with assumptions because they cannot accept not knowing the truth. Silence also protects your energy. Every unnecessary explanation drains focus from the work that truly matters. Think about how much time people waste defending themselves against opinions that were never going to change. They argue with strangers, seek validation from critics, and spend countless hours trying to repair an image that exists only inside someone else's mind. Meanwhile, the person who remains silent invests that same energy into learning, improving, building, and preparing. Over time, this difference becomes impossible to ignore. There is a reason many of the strongest transformations happen in private. Seeds grow beneath the soil long before anyone sees a single leaf. Diamonds are formed under pressure where no audience exists. Even the strongest steel becomes powerful through intense heat hidden inside furnaces. Nature itself demonstrates that real strength develops away from applause. Human growth follows the same principle. The most meaningful changes rarely happen in front of spectators. They happen during lonely mornings, difficult nights, painful decisions, and disciplined routines that no one else witnesses. Silence is not about hiding from the world. It is about refusing to let the world interrupt your evolution. Every announcement creates expectations. Every promise invites judgment. Every public declaration gives critics another opportunity to measure your progress before you're ready. By remaining silent, you remove unnecessary pressure. Your focus stays on the process rather than the performance. You become committed to results instead of recognition. People often underestimate those who stop talking because they assume activity must always be visible. They believe if they cannot see movement, then nothing is happening. This illusion works in your favor. While attention shifts elsewhere, you gain the freedom to improve without distractions. You learn new skills without comparison. You correct mistakes without public embarrassment. You strengthen weaknesses without anyone realizing they ever existed. By the time your progress becomes visible, the foundation has already been built. Silence also strengthens emotional discipline. Choosing not to react requires greater control than reacting out of anger. Anyone can respond to an insult. Anyone can defend themselves during criticism. Very few people possess the patience to let time reveal the truth instead. Emotional discipline separates temporary confidence from genuine inner strength. It proves you are no longer controlled by other people's opinions, emotions, or expectations. Instead of allowing others to dictate your mood, you decide where your attention belongs. Eventually, something remarkable begins to happen. The people who once mocked your quietness start paying closer attention. They notice subtle changes in your confidence. They observe consistent progress without understanding how it happened. They become frustrated because they expected failure, yet every passing day makes you stronger. The silence they interpreted as defeat slowly becomes evidence of preparation. What they laughed at becomes the very reason they can no longer predict your next move. In the end, words fade, arguments are forgotten, and opinions constantly change, but disciplined action leaves permanent results. Long after the noise has disappeared, the person who mastered silence stands with accomplishments that require no explanation, proving that the strongest response to doubt is not another conversation, but a transformation so undeniable that even the loudest critics are left with nothing to say. There is a moment in every remarkable comeback when the goal quietly changes. At first, you want to prove everyone wrong. You imagine the look on their faces when they realize they underestimated you. You picture the apologies that may never come and the respect you hope to earn after everything you've endured. But as your journey continues, something unexpected happens. The hunger for revenge begins to fade, replaced by a far greater ambition. You stop chasing validation and start chasing mastery. That shift is where real power is born. The people who celebrated your loss believed they understood your limits. They measured your future by your worst moment. They assumed that one failure defined your entire story. They thought your confidence would disappear along with your success. What they never considered was that adversity has a way of creating people who no longer think, act, or dream the same way. Every difficult experience forces a choice. You either become trapped by your circumstances, or you allow those circumstances to reshape your character into something stronger. When you begin rebuilding yourself, the changes are almost invisible. You become more disciplined with your time because you understand how valuable every hour truly is. You become more careful about the people you trust because disappointment has taught you the difference between loyalty and convenience. You become more selective with your words because experience has shown you that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Slowly, these small changes transform your entire identity. The greatest comeback is never about recovering what you lost. It is about becoming someone who no longer depends on what was taken away. Many people spend years trying to return to the life they once had. They desperately chase the same opportunities, the same relationships, and the same version of themselves. But growth requires leaving that old identity behind. If hardship taught you anything, it is that survival demands evolution. You cannot enter a new chapter while clinging to an outdated mindset. This transformation changes the balance of power in ways others cannot understand. Before, your emotions were connected to their opinions. Their approval gave you confidence, and their criticism stole your peace. Now the situation is different. Their words no longer determine your direction. Their doubts no longer influence your decisions. They discover that they can no longer manipulate you because the person who needed their acceptance no longer exists. That realization unsettles them far more than any argument ever could. People often believe power comes from controlling others, but genuine power comes from controlling yourself. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to stay focused while others become distracted, and to continue moving forward despite criticism creates an inner stability that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. When you develop this kind of self-mastery, you become unpredictable. Those who once believed they knew exactly how you would react suddenly find themselves unable to influence your choices. As your life begins to improve, something else changes. The same people who ignored your potential begin noticing your consistency. They watch you accomplish goals without announcing them. They observe confidence that doesn't require attention. They sense a quiet certainty that wasn't there before. They cannot explain it because they assume success is only measured by money, recognition, or popularity. They fail to recognize that your greatest achievement is the person you've become through relentless discipline and self-respect. Your comeback also inspires people who are silently fighting their own battles. Without realizing it, you become proof that failure is not permanent. Others see someone who refused to remain defined by one painful chapter. They recognize that resilience is more powerful than talent, and that persistence often defeats natural ability. Your transformation becomes permission for someone else to believe that they too can rise beyond their current circumstances. Ironically, the people who once celebrated your downfall are forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. They expected your failure to remain permanent, while their own lives stayed unchanged. Instead, they remained trapped in the same habits, the same excuses, and the same thinking, while you continued evolving. The distance between you grows larger, not because you sought revenge, but because you committed yourself to continuous improvement when they were busy watching your mistakes. Eventually, success stops feeling like something you achieve and starts feeling like something you embody. It becomes visible in your discipline, your patience, your confidence, your decisions, and the standards you refuse to lower. By the time others recognize what you've become, they realize they are no longer facing the same person they once underestimated, but someone transformed by adversity into a force that cannot be controlled, discouraged, or confined by the expectations that once tried to define them. Every insult carries a hidden choice. You can allow it to become a wound that weakens your spirit, or you can transform it into fuel that strengthens your purpose. Most people never realize this because they spend their lives trying to escape criticism instead of learning how to use it. They believe respect comes when everyone speaks well of them. The truth is very different. The moment you decide to pursue something meaningful, criticism becomes unavoidable. The question is not whether people will doubt you. The question is what you will do with that doubt. When others celebrate your loss, they expect their words to become your prison. They hope you'll begin questioning your abilities. They want your confidence to collapse under the weight of their opinions. Their greatest victory would be convincing you that their version of your future is more accurate than your own. That is why mockery is rarely about humor. It is about influence. It is an attempt to shape your identity before you have the chance to define it yourself. Many people unknowingly surrender to this pressure. They replay negative comments in their minds until those voices become louder than their own beliefs. They begin making smaller decisions, avoiding bigger dreams, and settling for less than they truly desire. Over time, they stop living according to their purpose and start living according to other people's expectations. This is how potential quietly disappears, not because talent was missing, but because confidence was slowly replaced by fear. The strongest individuals reverse this process. Instead of allowing insults to reduce their ambition, they allow them to sharpen their determination. Every criticism becomes a reminder that they still have something to prove to themselves. Every rejection becomes another reason to improve. Every laugh from the crowd becomes another hour spent mastering a skill. Rather than arguing with those who underestimate them, they invest their energy in becoming undeniable. Pain has an unusual way of creating discipline when comfort cannot. A compliment may make you feel good for a moment, but a painful experience often changes your habits forever. The sting of failure teaches preparation. The memory of rejection encourages persistence. The disappointment of being underestimated pushes you to work harder than you ever imagined possible. What initially feels like emotional weight gradually becomes the force pulling you toward a stronger version of yourself. There is also wisdom hidden inside mockery. Sometimes criticism reveals weaknesses that need attention. Not every negative opinion deserves to be ignored. Learning to separate meaningless insults from valuable lessons is a sign of maturity. The emotionally disciplined person does not become defensive every time someone speaks negatively. Instead, they ask themselves a simple question: is there anything here that can help me grow? If the answer is yes, they improve. If the answer is no, they move forward without carrying unnecessary emotional baggage. One of the greatest advantages of turning mockery into motivation is that it keeps your focus where it belongs. Instead of spending your days proving people wrong through arguments, you prove them wrong through results. Words create temporary victories. Consistent action creates permanent change. Every hour invested in learning, practicing, building, and improving quietly separates you from the version of yourself that once felt defeated. Progress becomes your loudest response. The people laughing today rarely expect consistency. They assume your determination will fade after a few weeks, just like everyone else's. They believe motivation is temporary because they have never experienced the power of purpose. Purpose continues working long after emotions disappear. On difficult mornings, purpose gets you out of bed. On painful evenings, purpose reminds you why you started. While others depend on inspiration, purpose depends on commitment, and commitment always outlasts excitement. Eventually, the very people who mocked your efforts begin noticing the changes. They see skills they never expected you to develop. They witness confidence that no longer needs their approval. They observe opportunities arriving because of years of unseen discipline. Suddenly, the jokes become quieter. The criticism becomes less frequent. The celebration of your loss slowly turns into silent disbelief because reality no longer supports the story they once told about you. The greatest victory is not hearing your critics admit they were wrong. Many never will. The greatest victory is reaching a point where their opinions no longer control your emotions, your decisions, or your future. The same insults that once had the power to discourage you become reminders of how far you've come. Every painful word, every moment of rejection, and every celebration of your failure becomes another brick in the foundation of a life built on resilience, discipline, and unwavering belief in your own potential. There is something deeply ironic about the people who celebrate your fall. They believe they are witnessing the end of your story when, in reality, they are only watching the final moments of the person you used to be. They laugh because they assume failure is permanent. They congratulate themselves because they think they predicted your future correctly. What they fail to understand is that a person who refuses to quit is never truly defeated. Temporary setbacks only become permanent when someone decides to stop moving forward. The greatest mistake you can make after experiencing loss is believing you must immediately prove yourself to everyone who doubted you. That desire is understandable, but it often leads people to chase quick victories instead of lasting transformation. They rush into opportunities before they are ready. They make emotional decisions just to silence critics. They seek visible success rather than meaningful growth. In doing so, they become distracted by other people's opinions instead of their own purpose. True recovery is patient. It understands that rebuilding a powerful life takes time. Just as a strong foundation is laid before a skyscraper rises, a strong character must be developed before lasting success becomes possible. Every difficult day strengthens your resilience. Every disciplined habit reinforces your future. Every lesson learned through failure becomes another advantage when new opportunities appear. What feels slow today often becomes unstoppable tomorrow. People who celebrated your downfall rarely notice these quiet changes because they are focused on appearances. They look for dramatic announcements, overnight success, and instant results. They expect transformation to happen loudly. They overlook the silent decisions that create extraordinary lives. Waking up earlier, staying committed when motivation disappears, refusing to complain, choosing discipline over comfort, and continuing to improve without recognition. These are the moments that eventually create a comeback no one expected. One of the most satisfying moments in life is not hearing an apology. It is watching reality quietly correct every false assumption people made about you. Without saying a single word, your actions begin rewriting the story they once believed. The person they described as weak becomes resilient. The individual they dismissed becomes respected. The dream they laughed at becomes reality. No argument could ever be more convincing than consistent results. Ironically, your success often creates discomfort for those who celebrated your failure. They expected your loss to justify their opinions forever. When you rise again, they are forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. If you could rebuild after everything you experienced, then perhaps the limitations they accepted in their own lives were never permanent either. Your comeback becomes a mirror reflecting the excuses they continue making. That reflection is often more painful than any words you could ever speak. There is another lesson hidden inside this journey. Success should never become an act of revenge. Revenge keeps your attention connected to the past. Growth directs your attention toward the future. If every achievement exists only to make someone else regret underestimating you, then your happiness remains dependent on their reaction. Real freedom begins when your purpose becomes larger than your critics. You stop building a better life to prove something to others and start building it because you finally understand your own worth. As your confidence grows, you begin noticing changes that have nothing to do with money, status, or recognition. You become calmer under pressure because you've survived worse. You become wiser with your decisions because you've learned from painful mistakes. You become more selective about the people you allow into your life because experience has taught you the value of genuine loyalty. These internal victories matter far more than public applause because they cannot be taken away by changing circumstances. Eventually, the people who once celebrated your loss realized they misunderstood the entire situation. They believed your difficult season was evidence of weakness, but it was actually the training ground for your future strength. They saw broken dreams while you were developing unbreakable discipline. They saw failure while you were building wisdom. They saw an ending while you were preparing for a beginning they never imagined possible. The most powerful response to those who celebrated your downfall is not anger, pride, or revenge. It is becoming so focused, so disciplined, and so committed to your purpose that their opinions lose all influence over your direction. By the time they recognize the person standing before them, they understand that the loss they once celebrated was never your greatest defeat. It was the defining moment that awakened your resilience, reshaped your identity, and launched you toward a future far greater than anything they believed you could achieve.